There are new developments taking place over the U.S. proposal to end the Russia-Ukraine war. A U.S. official says Ukraine has agreed to a deal to end the war with Russia. However, Ukraine has given no such confirmation yet. Earlier, the U.S. had said that there were still points of disagreement over the deal, but that American diplomatic teams were working around the clock to get the peace deal over the line. Amid all these twists over the peace negotiations, Ukraine is still getting bombarded by Russia. Ukraine said that at least 7 people were killed in overnight attacks on the capital, Kiev. Moscow fired both drones and missiles at Kiev. At least 2 people were killed when fires erupted in a residential area. 4 others died after an explosion at a warehouse. While the fighting has not stopped, Russia has also given its view on the ongoing negotiations. Their Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov highlighted the last meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Putin, the one in Anchorage, Alaska, back in August. Lavrov said that once the U.S. negotiations with Ukraine are concluded and changes are made to the peace plan, it should still reflect the spirit and letter of the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska.
We have channels of communication with our U.S. counterparts, and we use them. We expect to receive the version they consider interim after the coordination phase with the Europeans and the Ukrainians ends. Then we will review it, because if the spirit and letter of Anchorage, the key understandings we recorded, are stripped out, it will be a fundamentally different situation. But for now, I repeat, we have not received anything officially.
His statement comes amid reports that a delegation from the U.S. has held unannounced peace talks with Russian officials in UAE's capital, Abu Dhabi. The American side was led by U.S. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll. The exact nature of the talks with the Russians has not been made public. However, he is also expected to meet a Ukrainian delegation in Abu Dhabi. Meanwhile, the U.S. had reportedly pressed Ukraine to accept its proposal to end the war with Russia during the recent talks in Geneva. This despite Kiev's protests that the plan conceded too much to Moscow. A senior official quoted in the reports said Washington did not directly threaten to cut off aid if Kiev rejected its proposal, but that Ukraine understands that this was a distinct possibility. The U.S. plan, originally made up of 28 points, would see Ukraine effectively cede its eastern Donetsk and Luhansk regions to Russia and slash the size of its military. On Sunday, Ukrainian, U.S. and European officials met in Geneva to draft an updated version of the plan to end the war, but the Kremlin responded saying that it would not accept European amendments. The White House has meanwhile pushed back on criticism that President Trump was favoring Russia in his efforts to end the war.
Is not engaging with both sides equally in this war to bring it to an end is a complete and total fallacy.
Levitt said that there is no meeting scheduled between Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky this week. Earlier reports said that Zelensky could travel to the U.S. to discuss with Trump sensitive aspects of a plan to end the war.
Команда наша доповідала сьогодні вже по новому драфту кроків, і це дійсно правильний підхід. Чутливі речі, сенситивні речі я обговорю з президентом Трампом. Україна ніколи не буде перепоною для миру. Це наш принцип, спільний принцип. І мільйони українців розраховують і заслуговують на достойний мир. Все для цього зробимо. Ми готові працювати максимально швидко.
Trump initially gave Zelensky until Thursday to respond to the first version of the plan, but German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has thrown doubts on Trump's deadline, saying at an EU-Africa summit in Angola that discussions will be a lengthy, long-lasting process. UK Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper says important progress has been made in efforts towards a just and lasting peace, but insisted that Russia now needs to come to the table and stop bombardment. Professor Andrew Latham is a distinguished scholar of international relations, strategic studies and political economy. He is now joining us live from Minnesota, United States. Professor Latham, thank you very much for your time. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says Russia could reject an amended U.S. peace plan if its terms are, quote, fundamentally different to the understanding reached during the U.S.-Russia summit in Alaska. If that happens, how will that alter the dynamics of the war?
Well, dynamics of the peace process might be altered, but the way peace processes tend to work is that a broker puts ideas on the table, one side responds, another side responds, and over time there's an iterative process in which they come to some kind of an agreement. I think we're only about halfway through that process at the moment. The 28 points were a good point of departure, informed by the Russians, to be sure, informed by American understandings of what Ukraine wants. And now there's going to be some push and shove, some back and forth, as it were. And I'm guardedly optimistic, given the grinding stalemate on the battlefield, that the two sides, the two principals, are going to come to some agreement around the idea put on the table by the United States. The complicating factor here is the Europeans, who feel left out, excluded, and marginalized in all of this, and may be playing a joker card, as it were.
Professor, the Europeans, Ukraine, Russia, and the United States say that some work needs to be done. The White House says further talks are required between Ukraine, Russia, and the United States as it works to reach an agreement to end the war. In your view, what really is needed now if these talks keep happening and nothing conclusive comes out of them?
Well, I think something conclusive will have to come out of them. The Ukrainians have to accept that they've lost on the battlefield. They're not going to get Crimea back or Donetsk and Luhansk, and that's that. But Russia's not going to get everything it wants either. It's not going to get a cap, a complete cap on the Ukrainian military, for example. It's likely that Ukraine will not ever be part of NATO, but NATO will be very involved in Ukraine. Both sides are going to have to recognize that they cannot achieve their maximalist aims. They're going to have to accept what they possibly can minimally. And I think the Americans, to be honest, Washington is kind of playing a broker role, trying to make that happen. The complicating factor, to my mind, really is the Europeans. It always has been. Boris Johnson, way back at the beginning of this war, was the guy that complicated a deal that the Turks had brokered, which would have brought this war to an end in 2023. European sensitivities and sensibilities and identity politics are so wrapped up in this. They are the complicating and possibly completely frustrating factor in this process.
More like a stumbling block.
More than a stumbling block, yeah. As I said earlier, using a joker, playing that role of not constructive, let's put it that way.
All right. Professor Andrew, it's good to see you. Thank you very much for talking to us today.
Great to be here as always. Thank you.